everybody. This is Miss Sonia Gedla, the principal of Douglas Memorial High Secondary School, and I welcome you back to my video podcast series Talk the Talk. And today I'm filming my 7th episode, and today we're going to talk all about poetry, its magic, madness, and music. So, poetry for me is quite deep, intimate and personal. It is an outpour of feelings and emotions, and I feel that poetry is an expression of the mind and the reflection of a person's soul and personality. And as the topic rightly suggests, it has the ability to transport you into a different world, a world of magic, and there is some amount of madness to it. And of course, if you can hear it, it creates beautiful music too. And poetry has the power and the ability to impact minds, change lives, and make you feel a million different things. So today I'll be in conversation with a fellow poet, a dear friend of mine whom I've known since college days. And I must say that she has blossomed into this wonderful lady because at such a young age she has achieved so many great milestones. So I'm so happy and privileged to have you, Ms. Somrita Urni Ganguly. So today you're my guest speaker and I'm just so happy. Thank you so
I'm
much
so
for
happy to be here, Sonia. And the feeling's completely mutual. I mean, we go back a decade.
I
It's
know.
hard to believe, but we go back a decade, actually more,
Yeah.
um, a way more than a decade. And it's beautiful to see this woman in front of me that I so admire today.
Yeah. So I welcome you, Ms. Somrita Urni Ganguly. Thank you so much for joining me today in my video podcast. So before having this conversation on poetry, I would like to introduce you to my viewers. Ms. Somrita Urni Ganguly is a professor, poet, and award-winning literary translator. She was affiliated with Brown University, Rhode Island as a Fulbright Doctoral Research Fellow. She is the editor of Quesadilla and Other Adventures Food Poems and has translated Dinesh Chandra Chattopadhyay's Fire Songs, Ashutosh Natkar's Shakuni, Master of the Game, and Shankar Lal Sengupta's Midnight Sun Love Lyrics and Farewell Songs. Somrita translates from Bengali and Hindi to English and was selected by the National Centre for Writing UK as an emerging translator in 2016. Somrita's work has been showcased at the 2017 London Book Fair, and she has read her works in several cities such as Bloomington, Mumbai, Boston, Kolkata, Delhi, Hyderabad, Itanagar, Miami, and Providence. She has been published in Asymptote, Words Without Borders, In Other Words, and Trinity College Dublin's Journal of Literary Translation, among others. Somrita teaches British literature to undergraduate and graduate students in Kolkata and has presented research papers at various national and international conferences in India, Singapore, UK, and USA. She has 14 academic publications to her credit and is a recipient of the Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund Award in the year 2013 and the Sarojini Datta Memorial Prize 2011. So thank you once again. Shall I call you Miss Somrita or just Urni?
Just Urni for you, always.
Yeah. So thank you so much once again. So shall we jump into this conversation? It's going to be an
For
interesting one.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Poetry is always something like that. And you've got it in the title.
Yeah.
It's magical. It transports people. I'm so happy to be with you today, Sonia.
Thank you so much. So Urni, my first question to you would be, what does poetry mean to you?
We're starting with the most difficult one, Sonia.
Yeah.
But as you were saying, poetry is something that is intimately felt. It is something that's very personal. So I feel how I see poetry might be subjective and might differ from how you see poetry.
Absolutely.
But for me, a good poem is one that changes me a little bit. And it does not have to be a huge seismic shift, but even if a poem is able to move me ever so slightly as a person, help me think a little differently, alter my mood just a little bit, or change me in any way from the person that I was or the place that I was in when I initially started reading the poem, then I feel it's a good poem.
I know.
Because a good poem should be able to unhinge us, disturb us a little bit. And this could be a very gentle process of waking us up, or it could be a violent process of, jerking us out of our complacence. That really depends on the tone and the intent of the poem. But there should be some change in us, no matter how little. I feel that makes a good poem.
Yeah. And just the other day, I mean, it just struck me. I shared something on my Facebook, and it was from this movie, I think, Dead Poets Society. So yeah, it was written that science and engineering and other area of life and work. I mean, we need all that to sustain our lives, but you need poetry, beauty, and romance. I mean, also so that you can for what you can live. It helps you live, and you're absolutely right when you say that.
Also, it's just really significant to be talking about this now,
Yeah.
during these long lockdown days,
Yes.
because there are policymakers, there are economists around the world that feel artists are inessential. But really, I sometimes wonder, how would this pandemic look if we did not have any art to see us through
I know.
these 7 months or these 8 months? So
These are some of the darkest days that we have experienced. So when we are really low and we feel hopeless, so we need something that would help us pass through this storm. So
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
There was this old poet that used to say, this was a poem, and I'm sort of roughly translating it, and he asked, will there be singing in the dark times? And then he said,
Of
yes,
course,
there will
of
be
course.
singing in the dark times. There will be songs about
the dark times.
So,
yes, I can relate to that. Okay, so Urni, you're a literary translator. You have translated many poems into different languages. So do you think the essence of poetry is lost in translation? The essence and meaning of poetry from this language to that is lost while translating. What do you think?
No.
I'm asking,
no. Yes.
and I'm asking that to a translator. So
but also, it does not, and that is what the world fears, that that there's going to be a loss of sorts. That is an inherent fear. But let me assure you, poetry is not lost in translation. It is translation. Poetry is translation. It is a translation of our thoughts into words, of our words into the written form on paper. And, between what we think and what we write, there falls a shadow. If you go back to Eliot's words from The Hollow Men, he said, between the conception and the creation, between the thought or the emotion and the expression, there falls a shadow. So, I feel we're always already existing in this state of inherent loss. We aren't able to emote all that we feel. We aren't able to express all that we want to say. So instead of seeing this act of translation as a process of loss, I look at it as a process through which we gain things, where you gain entry into new worlds, into new cultures, into a new world order, into a new way of thinking, into a world that I wouldn't otherwise have access to. So I think it's good to remember that the translation will never be equal to the source text. It is always going to be an equivalent. And that is something we need to learn to accept. So, if you were to ask me, should we have a translation of that book which is bad, or should we have no translation of that book? I would always say bad translation. Let's have something.
I know.
How else am I going to understand what Faiz wanted to say, what Rumi wanted to say, what the greats around the world wanted to say?
But what do you have to say when it comes to those rhyming verses? like translating rhyming verses, because many of poems, I mean, many of the poems have the blank verse form. So maybe it's not that difficult. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what about the rhyming verses? I mean, when it comes to that, does that get difficult
You're
translating?
right, for sure. Obviously translating rhyme is more difficult.
Hmm.
Translating poetry over prose is more
Yeah.
difficult. It's definitely not impossible,
Okay.
because as a translator, you also have to realize that this is something that we talk about among translators in the translation circuit. The name the translator phenomenon, because
Mm,
earlier when you read works, you didn't know who the translator was.
mm,
And that is really changing now because translators are getting named on the book cover or the back cover at
okay.
least. Um, that's because as a translator, you're almost co-writing this book.
Mm,
What you are producing is your reading of
mm.
that book, and those are your words on paper. So for sure, it is difficult, but it's
Not
definitely not
not
impossible.
impossible.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think you have to sort of just keep in mind the fact that what you're doing is transcreating this work for the world to read. Remain faithful to the meaning,
Mm-hmm.
the sense of the poem, and then play with it um,
Okay.
within those boundaries.
You just now mentioned that we cannot emote all that we want. So I know of a lot of people who have a lot to say, but they fail to express. So what's your tip as a writer to such people?
I would say that you have to tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
You have to say it because nobody else will do that for you. And your story is worth telling. And let no one convince you otherwise. So, I mean, I would just say be brave, take that pen, put ink on paper, and write. Because, writing also gives us a lot of clarity. At least it does that for me. There are things in my head that I can't understand. But when I put them on paper, they start making
Yeah.
a little more sense
Sense.
somehow.
Yeah, I can feel
So,
that too. Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah. And
yes,
I'll like
absolutely.
write on anything in front of me, like a diary, phone, computer, newspaper, or when I was like growing up, maths books. Like I'll write on anything. Um,
Like
so
it's
yeah,
chaos over here, and then once you start
yeah,
writing and words flow from your heart, I feel it's more
exactly.
structured, it makes more sense. I
Yes,
can
yes.
completely
It really,
understand that.
yeah, really helps to get all of that out. Um,
It's very
and
therapeutic, I feel. It's
it
very,
is
very therapeutic.
absolutely, it is that friend which you can't otherwise have.
Yeah.
So, it's
Poetry is
not,
a friend you never had.
yeah, a non-judgmental friend,
Yeah.
a very friendly
Absolutely.
friend.
Yes, yes. Um,
Yeah,
how do you think only poetry has evolved through ages and epochs?
it has, but so I would say that the the form has developed.
Hmm.
um, Obviously, feelings are eternal. Things that you felt 400 years ago, sort of, as human beings, we largely
Yes.
have the same feelings. But yeah, definitely the form has evolved. The way we express our feelings, that has evolved. And we've experimented with forms of expression. You could express heartbreak through a sonnet, or you could express it through blank verse.
Mm-hmm.
There are ages when certain modes of expression gain
Hmm.
precedence, and these come in waves.
Yeah.
There are once upon a time we wrote in rhymes. We wrote
Yeah.
only in
And
rhymes,
rhymes.
um, yeah.
But now we're
And
choosing free verse. Yeah, and so
exactly,
many other
yeah,
forms. Yeah.
absolutely. And rhymes are distinctly unfashionable. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to
Yeah.
write in rhymes anymore,
Mhm.
unless you're writing a limerick or something.
Mhm.
So yeah, writing styles have evolved, and they will keep evolving.
Yeah. One more question only, like, there's so many poetries out there. I mean, even in college days, maybe we've read T.S. Eliot. Okay, he was a modernist, and I remember Wasteland. And then we have Sylvia Plath, the great American poet. So those are like really difficult poems not so easy to decipher or to understand. So I feel that for today's youth, I mean, they go away from poetry, or they are just scared of, looking into those pages because they can't understand or find meaning. So what do you have to say?
About how to find meaning
Yeah.
in, Sonia, this again is something which is very, very deeply felt and intimate.
Yeah.
Um,
So what I meant, like, do you
yeah,
need to know about the poets, like backstory or what they're going through about their life in order to read them, is what I'm trying to
yeah,
question you about.
that's a very significant question, Sonia, because I personally, I would like to know the poet's story.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, where is this person coming from? Where
From.
is this person writing from? What is that period? T.S. Eliot starts making a lot more sense when you realize that he's writing this in the backdrop of the wars, the
Yeah.
imminent wars.
Yeah.
Sylvia Plath starts making a lot more sense when you know that place that she's coming from, that
From.
place of hurt and betrayal, that place of longing for companionship and understanding. So I would definitely like to know about the person as well. However, I think that is the beauty of good poetry.
Yeah.
Um, we are reading Shakespeare 400, 500 years down the line,
Yeah.
and you don't need to know everything about Shakespeare. So I think the poem starts in that place where it's
Mhm.
rooted in the poet's personal journey, in the poet's personal story,
Yeah.
but it moves on. It transcends beyond that. And a
Absolutely.
good poem survives because you identify with it at some level. You identify with, you know, if you're going through heartbreak, you're going to identify with a certain kind of poetry.
Hmm.
If you're in a happy relationship where everything is blissful, you're going to identify with a different kind of poem, a different genre, maybe. So, yeah, I mean, I feel it starts in a particular place, but then it's much bigger than that.
Okay.
You make the poem what it is
Yeah.
as a reader,
So,
eventually.
Urni, this is an age where people are writing and reciting more freely. So, poetry, slam, and open mic, these are like, much relevant now. And what do you have to say about that?
Sonia, the digital platform has really democratized the publishing
Hmm.
industry to a great extent. And if you want to avoid the checkpoints and the gatekeepers of the industry, you're free to publish on your
Hmm.
blog, on your website, your social media. There are, of course, certain pitfalls to that, to this kind of a free space, because there's no quality control, no editorial intervention.
Absolutely.
But honestly, I would much rather hear more voices than fewer. I'm always pro plenitude like
Hmm.
that. And we also have to give the readers credit. People aren't dumb. If they don't identify with what you're writing, if it doesn't work for them, they're not going to read them.
Hmm.
So eventually, it really does come down to how the reader feels
Okay.
about that work you're putting out there. So yeah, I'm really happy with this plenitude, and of course there are so many platforms and spaces now, as you rightly mentioned, that are dedicated solely to performance poetry or poetry slams, as you would call. In India, in South Asia, actually, it's really interesting because I feel performance poetry is not entirely new to our culture, because we started out as an oral culture.
Hmm.
Our epics, our folk tales, our
Yes.
legends, traditionally they've
Yeah.
been passed on through oral performances and readings. So for us, I feel performance poetry is a return to those roots, and those times, but obviously in a new, modern, contemporary context.
And thank you so much for mentioning that, that you would like to hear more voices than fewer, because it takes so much of courage to go out there and share something. And then there's so many people who'll critique you, will judge you. So when you spoke about quality control, at least give them a chance. I mean, let them just voice out. I mean, that's more important than finding flaws or critiquing. I mean, thank you so much for
Yeah,
mentioning
yeah.
that for
No,
the budding
Sonia,
poets.
now that I've been sort of in this industry for a
Yeah.
while, I'm beginning to understand some of these nuances. I was in that place where I didn't, I took rejections very personally. And then one day I
Rejections are good.
Yes. And
Yeah.
and they are never personal, Sonia.
Yeah.
That's something
Yeah.
an editor told me, and it was really like, one of those epiphanic moments for me, a moment of epiphany, a moment of revelation, because as a publisher, you really also have to think from their point of view. If they are going to invest $20,000
Mm.
in that book, they also need to figure out if they're going to be able to get that money back
Yes.
somehow. So,
Absolutely.
as publishers, I understand
Mm.
that, they're going to think of a lot of things, the market economics, sellability, etc. Uh, Sometimes they are right, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they are
They're
wrong.
wrong.
And because there is room for that error, I really appreciate this sort of new democratic
Yeah.
space where you can go out, test,
Yeah.
feel the waters, see if it's working,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
never take criticism that personally. It's not about you as a person.
So,
It's about, that work in that moment.
okay. So, Urni, what made you fall in love with words and verse? Any particular poet or poets who inspired you to be who you are today?
Ah. I think I wouldn't be half the person if you took away my words, my language. That song,
Yeah,
it's only words and words are all I
I
have to
have.
take your heart
Yeah.
away. I mean, I thought the song was written for
Beautiful.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really only words that I have as companions. I've always been an avid reader. That has always been my world of escape. And I realized through reading, through words that other people wrote, that we're never alone in the world.
Mhm.
There could be a young girl sitting in the Scottish Highlands looking to break free, looking for love and respect, looking for a home. And how different is that from my desires, as
Mhm.
maybe as I sit here in our dear old Calcutta? So, reading has always made me feel heard and understood. um, I grew up in a home. Well, my parents were hardly at home; they were working when I was growing up, and so I'm really grateful to them that they introduced me to these friends. That they left me in the company of books because I couldn't
Absolutely.
have asked for better company. About some of my favorites. Well, I think my earliest. This is true for so many of us. Our favorites, our first favorites, are always our parents.
Yeah.
And the bedtime stories they make up for us, the rhyming verses that they tell us,
Yeah.
about queens and faraway kingdoms and faraway lands. So yeah, I feel that's where it started. My first inspiration was my mom. My dad's actually started writing a lot during the pandemic, and
Okay.
we've got this schedule where we spend 1 hour after dinner every night, and he reads to me. So we've been doing that for the
Oh,
last 8 months, and
wow.
it's really something I look forward to all day.
Even
Where
as
I'm
a
like,
grown up,
yeah,
you're getting
yeah,
this blessing, of having
yeah.
a father read to you. I mean, that's
Yeah,
precious.
I
It's
wake
very
up and
precious.
I ask him, have you written something for me today? Or have you written anything?
That is so
Something.
cute. Okay.
So yeah, that's
That's
where I
so
started.
nice. Yeah.
But I admire a lot of poets. We've read so many because we've been in a course like that. We've been in a field like that.
Hmm.
When I first started writing, my favorites were Pablo Neruda and Derek Walcott. Um, Unfortunately, I feel betrayed by both of them uh, because they've both serially molested women. So I
Okay.
don't know what to do with the beautiful poetry of these bad men anymore. And I don't think there should be room for any kind of hero worship of these people. But besides that, I mean, there are so many other good female poets that are writing. I've always felt this sort of deep sense of sisterhood and connection with Kamala Das, with Sylvia Plath, Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
Uh, there are so many, and
Okay. Yeah, you cannot just name one. I can
you'll
understand.
always find me with a book.
Yeah. Okay, talking about book, let's talk about the recent book of poetry you published, Quesadilla and Other Adventures, Food Poems. How did that come about, Urni?
Oh, well, it's possibly a very millennial story. I would post food pictures on my social media, And
I've seen so many of them being a Facebook friend of yours.
yeah, yeah,
Pictures, flooded with, food. I mean, your timeline is flooded with food
yes,
pictures, and
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
you
And
such a foodie. And I'm a foodie too. I love eating food.
oh,
So,
me too, me too. I love eating. I love cooking for people. You know, the
okay.
joy you see in people on people's faces when you can feed them. It's just
Yeah.
so yeah, that's where it started. It's a millennial story. I was posting these food pictures, and
Okay.
I was writing little things. And then a poet friend told me one day, you write about food all the time. Why don't you? And you write poetry. Why didn't you think of bringing the two together? And that's where it started. And now we have this book with poems about food as our experiences and emotions related to food.
Yeah. Somewhere I had read that it talks about, I mean, I don't know, you've infused these two concepts, food and politics. I mean, what is this correlation? Can you just tell us
Oh,
a little bit? Yeah.
for sure, Sonia. I mean, I think food is no longer just about its nutritional value. It's a lot more. It's about, history,
Yeah.
culture, your identity, your politics, and, especially sitting in times like ours where governments around the world, where people in power around the world want to judge you for your eating habits. Um, Food takes a whole new meaning, because there are so many people that want to look into your refrigerator, that want to look into your cauldrons, that want to see how you smell, what you've eaten. Food has really transcended just its sort of nutritional purpose and turned into
Mm.
something hugely political today. And there are people around the world that are getting victimized for their eating habits and eating preferences, which is so unfortunate.
Yeah.
Something so personal and so necessary turns into, the sort
Mm.
of takes a political dimension. And so we actually have a poem in this book which is
Yeah. Can you
called
just read some of your favorite poems for us, for the viewers today?
yeah, I
Yeah.
can do that. I can. Yeah, I wasn't actually planning on reading from
Yeah.
this
Just one
book,
or two.
but
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I can read to you since we are talking about food poems. Then
Yeah.
let me, maybe I'll read one which is about food. Um, but this will also tell you how this book is. It's not just about eating or food. It's about all of these things connected with food. So, this one's about women and their desires, and it's called Eating a Mango in Calcutta.
Okay.
The Irish nun in finishing school taught me how to eat a mango in summer. Knife, fork, tip of my forefinger, thumb. But some women come from a different soil. They eat with hands, mouths, eyes. My mother, my mother's mother, my mother's mother's mother. Women wild, fertile. Women who dared to laugh, bleed, wear red. It is not eating, they said, until you've plucked the fruit, spat out seeds, spilled the juice, sucked it dry. You cannot eat ripe mangoes on hot afternoons in Calcutta without sweating, for eating is a verb, a metaphor that can birth love. So, yeah, this
So
one.
beautifully expressed. And who eats it with a fork or a spoon? Just take it, you grab it, and you
Yeah,
suck
yeah,
it. I know,
exactly.
I know, I know.
Unless it's dirty,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
pleasurable eating.
I know. That's why in India we still prefer using our hands.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another one from you?
Okay. Uh, so this is somewhat related to, this is not a part of this anthology. It's related
Okay.
to eating. It's something you might have actually heard this poem before, Sonia. I read it at a festival recently, but this is
Big
for our
fat
audience.
poem is see, I guessed it.
Because
Okay.
you're onto food and eating.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yeah,
this is that poem. It's that big fat
that
poem.
poem.
No introductions, no conclusion, just the body of this big fat poem. It wasn't about you, he said, laughing at yet another joke on yet another fat girl. No, it probably isn't about me, but have you ever seen me at my worst? Have you ever seen me with my masks off? Have you ever gone to a dentist to get your teeth scaled? And before letting you out of his chamber, has he asked you to lose some weight? Because, of course, your dental problems are related to your slow metabolism. Have you been told that you can't play the lead in a play despite being a good actor because the director assumes that your BMI does not complement the role? Because, of course, fat people can't dare to fall in love on stage or in real. I've been an elf on stage, an elephant, and even a tree, but never the romantic lead because people don't buy that kind of a story ever. Have you lived on oats for months and months on end like a horse because you're sick of seeing a face in the mirror that no one desires? Because you want the man you love to love you back. Have you tried and tried and tried to change yourself? Tried very, very hard to be a different version of you, the one that is not laughed at on the road, in the subway, at the salon, in a cafe, in the school, in the college, in the university, at work, at home, everywhere. Have you tried and failed? Because then you would perhaps know what it takes for me to live on one egg, one apple, and one bowl of yogurt every day. What it takes for me to make endless notes on squats and lunges and push-ups and Pilates, what it takes for me to watch motivational videos on YouTube night after every night, finding zero motivation in them to help me want to wake up. I've tried, sometimes succeeded, but very often failed. This time when you laughed, it probably wasn't about me, but each time you say something, anything, about another fat girl disguised as concern for her health and well-being, I go right back to when I was 13, 16, 19, 25, 26, 27. I go back to my whole life spent as an Excel-sized apology. I go back to my anger, my frustrations, my desperation. I go back to all the taunting, teasing, demonization, and fetishization that has led to this one egg, one apple, one bowl of yogurt routine, a zero figure, and zero self-confidence. Every time you laugh at another woman, it will be about me. And that I shall not permit anymore.
I mean, that
Yeah.
made me so emotional. Every time I read that, I mean, it makes me really emotional.
I know, and I remember
think
what
so
you
many
wrote.
women can resonate with this, I feel. Yeah. We've all been in that place, I think. Yes.
Yeah, and you know, Sonia, we live with different kinds of insecurities.
Yeah.
Some people have body image issues. Other people are fighting with other insecurities, and we really just need to, you know, sit one day, talk to ourselves, and say, "That's enough." Because who's profiting from this insecurity? Yeah.
Okay, like I said at the beginning, Urni, that poetry can be very intimate and personal. So do you think sharing our lives with a world full of strangers can be an outrageous move? Because there's so many people, you know, who who spew hate and venom, and they are very,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, they're always critiquing,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
judgmental. So what do you have to say?
You know, Sonia, one thing that I want to say at the very onset is that, you know, criticism goes two ways. As poets, we need to learn to be able to accept criticism, but
Yeah,
also the current trend of criticism is just vicious. It's not criticism; it's trolling.
yeah, that's the right
Criticism
word.
that is, yeah, not constructive need not be taken seriously,
Yeah.
because that person behind that blind screen is not trying to help you. That person is basically just trying to bring you down. So I think we need to sort of be able to, for our own sanity, make that distinction between what I should take into my life and what I should just filter out. Having said that, about sharing poetry with the world, I think it'll vary from person to person. You know, I know of a lot of people that find comfort in talking to strangers. Um, they find this comfort that they haven't found in their partners or their friends or their family. You know, that's why we still have these anonymous chat rooms. I never
Yeah.
understood why. I saw it was preposterous, but
Mm,
you know, I think I've learned over time that people have their own struggles that we know nothing of, and everybody at the end of the day is basically looking for acknowledgement, for someone to hear them out, to understand. You know, that's why you go to a therapist.
yeah.
Again, you
Who's a
share your,
stranger? Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
talking to a stranger.
Yeah.
You're, you know, sharing your most intimate thoughts with the stranger who also charges you per hour. Um, but you find something comfortable
Yeah.
in that, something comforting in that. And poetry, you were talking about this earlier. Poetry is a form of therapy for so many people. You know, this cathartic way of giving vent to your feelings that you can't handle any longer. And sometimes it's just a cry for help, you know, when you're writing
Yeah.
for the world to see. It's a cry for help. You know, the confessional poetry of Sylvia Plath, we've talked about her a
Mm.
bit today, Kamla Das, you know, where they reference their life. They really just want to be heard and understood by a sympathetic reader, by people that won't sit in judgment on them, like a boyfriend or a husband or a partner or a friend
Would.
might.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, just talking to a stranger in that way can actually be uh, a very, even though it sounds intimidating, it can be very comforting in certain ways. It has healed a lot of people talking to strangers. And poetry is just, you know, just this another way of healing, of reaching out, of sharing. But of course, there are people who write only for themselves. I know poets like that who've not read a word of what they've written to anyone
Yeah.
else.
They never
And
share it with anyone, but they
no, they
write for
don't.
themselves. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is a form of healing as well, in
Yeah.
expressing.
Yeah.
There'll be some who write only for friends. So that's like private circulation. They write and they circulate it among people
They know.
that's
Yeah.
their, yeah, that they know.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, you know, I would say, uh, you know, poetry can be a friend. Choose your friend.
Yeah.
Choose how much and what you want to share with that friend.
Yeah. So my last question to you would be, Urni.
Oh no,
Uh,
we're coming to an
it's
end. I
a,
want to keep talking to you
I
forever.
know this is such a wonderful conversation that we're having. Can you please share your experience of writing poetry with our budding poets? Because there's so many at Douglas Memorial High Secondary School who love poetry, who do open mics, poetry slams,
Ah,
and who write. So some inspiration for them. I mean, how can they master this art of writing poetry?
no. uh, well, I could start by saying that there are 6 rules to writing poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and I could start enumerating them one after the other. But the fact is, no one in the world knows what these rules are. That's either very fortunate or very unfortunate. There really aren't any rules to writing poetry. Um, but I do follow one secret. It's a secret that has been passed down for generations. People are usually very surprised when I share it with them, but I'll share it with you as well. The secret is to read, you know. uh, read, and then read some more. If you want to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. If you can't make time to read, I'm sorry, but you're not ready to be a writer yet. Because reading opens up your mind in ways that very few other things can. And it also, it's also a practice, because it shows you what kind of writing works for you and what doesn't. What mistakes, if you think of these as mistakes, what mistakes do you want to avoid? What positives do you want to repeat? Who do you want to write like? Who do you not want to write like? So really, if I had to share one tip, it would be to read. Read as much as you can. That should always come before writing. You can't start writing a story if you don't know the alphabets and if you don't know the letters of an alphabet. Reading is that alphabet for somebody that wants to be a writer, wants to write fiction or poetry. So that, and then the other thing is, it's something that all of us know. Be honest when you're writing. Write with the intention of telling your story, not with the intention of selling it. Because if you tell the story, more likely that it will sell.
That's a nice tip. A nice one. Good. Okay. Thank you so much, Urni. Even I would want this conversation to go on for us together, but we'll have to stop it here, unfortunately. We can continue maybe some other day.
For sure. It's always a joy to talk to you, Sonia.
Yes, yeah. So I hope the viewers enjoyed this conversation. I had a blast today with Ms. Somrita Urni Ganguly. It was quite insightful and an enriching experience for me, and I hope that you found it useful as well. So look forward to more podcast videos, and until then, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.